The Exelanok had ruled Earth for nearly 200 years. Their gleaming, silver ships hovered above every major city, their eerie blue lights casting long shadows over what remained of humanity's former glory. Earth's once proud nations were now mere sectors, divided and conquered. The Exelanok had made sure of it. No nation was spared from their control, and their technology, far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed, kept the humans in check. But deep within the heart of the crumbling cities, there were whispers of resistance, whispers of a rebellion. In the underground network of tunnels beneath New York's decaying skyline, the Crimson Rebellion had begun to take form. Commander Ilara Black, once a decorated officer in Earth's military before the fall, now led the group. Her once green eyes, sharp and calculating, now reflected a world full of fire and destruction. Her mind was focused, her resolve ironclad. And yet even she could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. They had found it, a relic buried deep beneath the ruins, a relic that could change everything. The artifact, as they called it, pulsed with an ancient energy that hummed through the cold stone walls of the underground vault. It had been hidden away for centuries, long before the Exelanok arrived. No one knew who had left it behind or why, but it was theirs now. "This is it," Ilara said quietly, her voice steady as she stood in front of the artifact. "This is what we've been fighting for." Beside her, Aiden, a young recruit who had barely survived his first skirmish against the Exelanok, looked up, awe written across his face. "But this thing it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's not just ancient. It's alive." Ilara's gaze flickered over the object. The artifact was a smooth, dark stone, etched with symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. As Aiden said, it was alive. Its energy pulses resonated through her fingertips when she touched it, sending a strange warmth through her body. It had the kind of power they needed, a force capable of crippling the Exelanok systems. With this weapon, they could finally challenge the Empire. But there was one problem. The Exelanok were already aware of them. Their eyes were everywhere, hidden among the people, watching for signs of insurrection. The rebellion couldn't afford to sit idle any longer. They had to strike first. Ilara turned to the group assembled in the makeshift command center, engineers, hackers, soldiers, and strategists, all with one common purpose. "We're hitting their communications hub. We disrupt their networks, and they lose control over their fleet for a few hours. That's all we need. We hit them fast, hit them hard." Aiden clenched his fists. "How do we get in without getting slaughtered? They'll be waiting for us." Ilara looked at him, her voice unwavering. "That's why we're not just attacking. We're going to plant a decoy at the main hub. The real strike comes at the secondary facility. We'll hit them from two sides. The Exelanok won't know what hit them." The team nodded, their faces grim but determined. Ilara had never let fear take root in her decisions. This plan was their only shot, and she wasn't about to let it fail. As she turned to leave, her mind flashed briefly to the artifact again. It hummed in the back of her mind, almost as if urging her to use it. But she couldn't, at least not yet. They needed to be careful. The power within this object was volatile, untested, and if it was as dangerous as it seemed, using it prematurely might destroy them all. Suddenly, an alarm blared. A red light flashed overhead, signaling an intrusion. The Exelanok had found them. "We're compromised," one of the techs shouted from the back. "They've breached the perimeter." Ilara's heart raced, but her face remained stoic. She wasn't going to let fear rule her. "Prepare the team. Move out. We'll take them down before they have a chance to reinforce. The plan stays the same." She gripped the artifact one last time before running toward the exit, the pulse of its energy still echoing in her mind. Outside, the Exelanok soldiers were already advancing, their sleek black armor and weapons making them a terrifying sight. Ilara's pulse quickened. The fight for Earth had just begun. The night was thick with tension. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of burning metal and smoldering debris. Ilara's team had barely escaped the initial ambush, an all-too-familiar tactic by the Xel'Nac. But their sudden assault wasn't just a random skirmish. It was a warning. They knew they were coming for the rebellion. As the team hurried through the underground tunnels, Ilara's mind raced. The plan had been simple: infiltrate, sabotage, disappear. But now, they were being hunted. And the Xel'Nac had the technology and manpower to do it swiftly. "We can't outrun them," Aiden said, his voice strained as he caught up with Ilara. He was young, eager, but inexperienced, still trying to find his place in the chaos. "What now?" Ilara shot him a sharp look, her mind already calculating their next move. "We fight. We make sure they pay for this little surprise of theirs." She wasn't just angry, she was desperate. They couldn't afford a setback. Not now. They pushed forward through a maze of corridors, moving deeper into the catacombs beneath the city. It had once been a part of the city's subway system, now a hideout for rebels. It was a network of passageways that connected various bunkers and safe houses, and it was their only means of escape. Behind them, the faint sound of booted feet echoed in the distance. Xel'Nac soldiers, likely hunting them down with their terrifying precision. The hunters had become the hunted, and Ilara had no intention of losing this fight. As they reached a dead end, Ilara stopped. The others clustered around her, their breath ragged, waiting for her orders. She looked down at the strange artifact in her hands. The energy pulsed again. Something was different this time. The artifact seemed to resonate with her, almost as if it was alive, pulling her in, urging her to understand its true power. She could feel it whispering in the back of her mind, fragments of knowledge from another age, another time. It wasn't just technology. It was something far older, something much more dangerous. "Ilara." Aiden's voice broke her concentration. She looked up, blinking away the fog in her mind. "We need to find the secondary hub. We're too exposed here." Her gaze fell on a map projected on a portable screen, which highlighted a nearby intersection. They would have to move fast. They quickly navigated their way to the location, hoping to outmaneuver their enemies. But Ilara couldn't shake the sense of dread creeping up her spine. The Xel'Nac were too close. She had been on enough missions to know when an ambush was coming. And this time, it was personal. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the tunnel, signaling that the enemy was near. Ilara turned to the others, their faces filled with both fear and determination. "Stay sharp," she ordered, her voice low. "We move quickly, no hesitation." The tension thickened, and then it happened. The ground shook violently as an explosion ripped through the corridor ahead. Dust and debris filled the air, and the team scrambled to find cover as a unit of Xel'Nac shock troopers stormed in. Ilara's heart pounded as the soldiers, their alien features hidden behind their dark, reflective helmets, emerged from the smoke, their weapons raised. It was a massacre waiting to happen. But Ilara wasn't about to go down without a fight. "Now," she shouted, springing into action. In a heartbeat, gunfire erupted in all directions. The Xel'Nac soldiers retaliated, their blaster fire disintegrating chunks of stone around them. Aiden and the others returned fire, but the odds were stacked against them. The rebellion was outnumbered and outgunned. But Ilara's mind was racing, thinking faster than her enemies, adapting, calculating. She reached for the artifact. Her fingers brushed the cold stone, and this time, it responded with a surge of energy that coursed through her body. A wave of strange power exploded outward from her, a force so intense it sent the Xel'Nac soldiers flying backward, their shields flickering and sparking. For a moment, everything fell silent. The air buzzed with the hum of the artifact's energy as Ilara stood at the center of the battlefield, breathing heavily. Her heart thudded in her chest, her body shaking from the strain. She had no idea what she had just unleashed, but it was enough to turn the tide. The Xel'Nac soldiers hesitated, regrouping. Their leader, a towering figure clad in black armor, raised his hand, signaling a retreat. The remaining troops fell back, dragging their wounded behind them. Ilara dropped to one knee, her vision blurring. The power had taken its toll. She couldn't keep using the artifact like this, not without understanding it. But she had no choice. "Did you see that?" Aiden asked, wide-eyed. What the hell was that? Ilara only had one answer. "I don't know. But it's not over. They'll be back. And next time, they'll be ready." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The rebellion's fight had just escalated, and Earth's fate was about to take an unexpected turn. The rebellion's victory was short-lived. Though the Selenok had retreated, their presence loomed like a dark cloud, and Ilara knew it was only a matter of time before they would return in force. The ambush had been too well coordinated, too precise. Someone had tipped them off. Someone who knew exactly where they were and what they were planning. They regrouped in one of the deeper bunkers, a reinforced concrete structure designed to withstand a direct assault. As the others tended to their wounds, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her. The artifact hummed quietly in her hands, its power undeniable, but it had come at a cost. Each time she tapped into it, the connection between her and the stone seemed to grow stronger, more invasive. The whispers were louder now, and she couldn't ignore them. "We can't keep running," Aiden said, pacing back and forth, frustration evident in his voice. "They'll keep coming after us. We need to hit them harder." Ilara looked at him, her face grim. "You're right, but we have to be smarter. The Excelnok are playing a game we're not prepared for, and we've just given them a reason to escalate." Her mind wandered back to the explosion that had torn through the tunnel earlier. That power she'd unleashed, it had been overwhelming, almost uncontrollable. But it had worked. The Excelnok had retreated, their pride wounded. They would not forget that. "We need intel," Ilara continued, scanning the room. "Find out what they know. Who's on the inside. Someone's feeding them our plans, and I intend to find out who." Aiden nodded, his eyes burning with determination. "I'll handle it. You don't have to." "No," Ilara interrupted, her tone firm. "You'll help me. We need to be in this together. If we're going to win, we need to trust each other. No more secrets." The room fell silent as Ilara's words settled over the team. The tension was palpable. The rebellion had fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground they held, but they were about to enter a new phase of war. The stakes had never been higher. Hours passed as the team worked tirelessly, hunting for the traitor within their ranks. They reviewed security footage, cross-referenced communications, and questioned every possible lead. But nothing concrete came to light. The traitor, if there was one, had covered their tracks well. It wasn't until the next day that they got their first break. One of the rebellion's most trusted hackers, Mara, discovered an anomaly in the encrypted transmissions. A pattern. A signature that seemed eerily familiar. It was subtle, but there was no mistaking it. The transmissions were being sent from within their own network. Someone close to them was the leak. Ilara's heart sank as she processed the implications. She had trusted every person in this room, but now she couldn't help but wonder if any of them were truly loyal. "I'll handle this," Ilara said, her voice cold. The thought of betrayal burned deep in her chest, but she couldn't afford to show weakness. "Everyone else, stay on guard. We're not letting this leak get any worse." Aiden stood up, his face tight with frustration. "Ilara, you can't." "I'm the leader," she cut him off. "I have to deal with this." She walked toward the comm station, her steps deliberate. She had to find the traitor before they destroyed everything they had built. As she ran through the data, her fingers flew over the keys, cross-referencing the transmissions and narrowing the search. She felt the familiar surge of power from the artifact as her mind sharpened, the whispers growing louder. The voice of Mara came through the comm system, breaking her concentration. "Commander, you need to see this." Ilara rushed over, her pulse quickening. On the screen, A series of video files played. It showed Mara, her face calm, eyes calculating, meeting with none other than Colonel Rix, the man they had thought was working to help the rebellion from the inside. Rix had been a former high-ranking officer in the Earth military before the fall, and his supposed defection to the Excellenok had been part of a larger strategy to sabotage their empire from within. But this footage told a different story. It showed Rix giving Mara detailed information about their operations, their movements, their targets. A treasonous exchange, carefully masked as an alliance. Ilara's blood ran cold. She had known Rix was unpredictable, but this was a step beyond what she could have imagined. His loyalty had always been suspect, but to betray them like this, to turn on his own people for the Excellenok, was unforgivable. Aiden's voice was low, his disbelief evident. We were wrong about him. He's been playing us all along. Ilara stood frozen, staring at the screen. Her hands clenched into fists, her mind racing with fury and disbelief. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was the end of everything they had worked for. Colonel Rix had been orchestrating their downfall from the inside, and now it was up to Ilara to pick up the pieces. We've lost the advantage, she said quietly, her eyes narrowing. But this war isn't over. We'll make him pay. As the room fell into uneasy silence, Ilara knew that the path ahead would be filled with more danger and betrayal. But she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The weight of betrayal sat heavy on Ilara's chest as she watched the footage of Colonel Rix and Mara, their treachery laid bare. The walls of the bunker seemed to close in around her, the air thick with the silence that followed the revelation. The team was reeling from the shock. They had trusted Rix. They had believed in him. Are we sure this is real? Aiden asked, his voice tight with disbelief. He was pacing again, his hand running through his hair in frustration. I mean, we're not exactly dealing with the most reliable intel, are we? Ilara didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was locked on the screen, her mind racing to process the implications of what she had just seen. This wasn't a mistake. The evidence was irrefutable. She could see the way Rix had spoken with Mara. Calm, composed, confident. He had been playing them all along, waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. I wish it were a mistake, Ilara said, finally looking away from the screen. Her voice was cold, resolute. But it's not. The betrayal ran deeper than just a few bad decisions. Rix had known the layout of the rebellion's operations, its movements, its plans. He had been using them as pawns in a game he had already decided. The enemy was no longer just the Excellenok. It was someone within their own ranks. What do we do now? Mara's voice cracked as she stepped forward, the guilt written on her face. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was no hiding the reality of her involvement. She had been compromised, and there was no going back. We deal with this, Ilara said, her eyes hardening. Rix is a traitor. We'll take him down. But first, we need to regroup and make sure the rest of the team stays intact. We can't afford any more leaks. Aiden shot her a look. You're talking like we're going to let him walk. Ilara, we can't just. I'm not going to let him walk, Ilara interrupted, her tone unwavering. But if we act too quickly, we risk exposing everything. We need a plan. There was no time to waste, but Ilara had learned the hard way that rushing into battle without a clear strategy could cost lives. The Excellenok were already on their tail. Now, with a traitor in their midst, they couldn't afford to make mistakes. We'll split the team, Ilara continued, her mind racing through potential options. Aiden, you'll take a squad and secure the secondary facility. We'll move forward with the operation, just as we planned. Mara, you're going to help me handle this. Get us close to Rix without raising suspicion. We need him alive, but we can't let him warn anyone. Mara nodded quickly, but Ilara could see the hesitation in her eyes. She had made a grave mistake, and it was hard for her to accept the consequences. But Ilara couldn't afford to let emotion cloud her judgment. The mission came first. You sure about this? Aiden asked, his gaze flickering between Ilara and Mara. We're walking into a trap. We know Rix has the Selnock's trust. If we fail, it's over for all of us, Ilara replied, cutting him off. But we don't fail. Not today. The atmosphere in the bunker was tense, the weight of the decision hanging heavily in the air. They were walking a fine line between victory and annihilation, and every step they took from here on out would be a gamble. But there was no turning back. As the plan took shape, Ilara gathered her thoughts. The team would have to move quickly, strike decisively, and leave no room for doubt. She couldn't afford to give Rix an opportunity to escape. But even more, she couldn't afford to lose her resolve. The fate of Earth rested on her shoulders now, and the cost of failure was far too great. I'll need time to get close to Rix, Mara said quietly, her voice small but determined. But I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Ilara turned to her, giving a sharp nod. I know you will. As the team prepared to split up, Ilara paused for a moment, staring at the artifact once more. The power it offered pulsed in the back of her mind, beckoning her. It was tempting to use it, to tap into the strength it gave her, but she knew better. This wasn't the time. Not yet. The artifact's power was something she still didn't understand, and until she did, it had to remain locked away. The time for secrets and manipulation was over. The final confrontation with Rix was imminent, and Ilara wasn't about to let anything, or anyone, stand in the way of Earth's future. She clenched her fists, the tension in her body coiling tight. This war was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The air in the underground bunker had grown stifling, each breath like a battle to remain calm. Ilara stood alone in the corner, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. The team was preparing for the mission, the atmosphere tense but focused. In just hours, they would confront Rix, the traitor, and attempt to put an end to the damage he caused. She didn't allow herself to dwell on the emotional cost. There was no time for that now. The plan was simple. Mara would get them close to Rix, acting as though nothing had changed. They would confront him, take him into custody, and extract every bit of information from him. But Ilara knew this would not be a clean operation. Rix had already proven that he was willing to betray them. There was no telling what he might do when cornered. Her thoughts were interrupted by Aiden's voice. Ilara, you ready? Aiden asked, his voice steady, but tinged with the same urgency that gripped the rest of them. His team was set, ready to strike the secondary facility and keep the Selnock off their trail. But they all knew that the real danger lay in the confrontation with Rix. As ready as I'll ever be, Ilara replied, turning to face him. Her expression was unwavering, but inside, the tension was unbearable. Every instinct told her that this mission was a powder keg, and all it would take was a single spark to set it off. Aiden met her gaze, his eyes filled with unspoken understanding. He trusted her, and more importantly, he trusted the team. But the betrayal had shaken them all. The lines between friend and foe had blurred. Who could they trust now? Once we move in, we won't have much time, Ilara said, her voice hardening as she shifted into tactical mode. We get Rix, get him to talk, and get out. No hesitation, no mistakes. Aiden nodded, his jaw tight. Understood. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself. She had led them this far, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of doubt that clawed at her. The Selnock were always one step ahead, and now, with a traitor in their ranks, their advantage had been eroded. They had to win this fight, no matter the cost. Mara entered the room just then, her expression unreadable. She had her own ghosts to confront, but for now, they were allies. She approached Ilara, her steps slow, almost tentative. You're sure you're ready? Mara asked quietly, her eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and determination. Ilara's gaze hardened. We don't have time for second-guessing. We either finish this, or we all die trying. Mara swallowed hard and nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. This was their only shot. The team moved out quickly, their footsteps barely audible as they made their way through the tunnels. Every shadow felt like it was closing in, every sound amplified in the tense silence. Ilara kept her hand on the hilt of her weapon, her mind running through the steps of their plan once more. They had no room for error. The closer they got to Rix's location, the more Ilara's nerves sharpened. Her instincts screamed at her, warning her that something was off. But she shoved it aside. They were too far in to back out now. They'd reached the location, the abandoned warehouse where Rix had been operating. The building was quiet, save for the soft hum of machinery and the distant sound of movement from the Selnox patrols. It was eerie, like the calm before the storm. Maris looked inside first, moving with the stealth of someone who had learned the art of deception long ago. Ilara and the rest of the team followed close behind, the tension palpable in the air. They had to stay hidden, make sure they didn't alert Rix to their presence. This had to be clean. Mara signaled them to stop just outside a small office. Ilara nodded and motioned for the team to take their positions. The time had come. As they entered the room, Ilara's gaze swept over the darkened interior. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, swallowing the space hole. There in the corner was Rix, standing in the dim light, his back to them, seemingly waiting. Ilara. Rix's voice was calm, too calm. He didn't even flinch as he turned around to face them, his eyes cool and calculating. I knew you'd come. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. His gaze flickered over the team, a smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Did you really think you could stop me? You're all just pawns in a much larger game. Ilara felt a flash of rage, but she suppressed it, keeping her composure. This ends now, Rix. You're coming with us. But Rix's smile only widened. You think it's that simple? Before Ilara could react, the walls around them shook, a low hum filling the air. Panic shot through her chest as the floor beneath them began to tremble. Something was happening, and it wasn't good. Rix's grin stretched further. You're not the only one with secrets, Ilara. And then the trap sprung. The ground beneath them shook violently, and Ilara instinctively dropped to one knee, her hand grasping the edge of a nearby table to steady herself. The tremors intensified, the walls groaning under the pressure of some unseen force. Panic rippled through the team as the dim light flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. What the hell is happening? Aiden shouted, his voice barely audible over the rumbling chaos. Rix's grin widened, but his eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating satisfaction. You thought you were in control, didn't you? You think you're still in the game. Too bad, Ilara. The board's been flipped. Ilara's heart raced. Her mind scrambled to process the situation, but everything was happening too quickly. The tremors grew more violent, knocking over equipment and sending sparks flying from the overhead lights. The noise was deafening, and then, just as abruptly as it had started, the room fell into a tense, suffocating silence. And then the ground cracked. A sharp, ear-splitting sound split the air, followed by a rush of air and a series of low-frequency rumbles that made her stomach churn. Ilara's eyes widened as she realized the truth. Rix hadn't been alone. The warehouse wasn't just a hideout. It was a trap, and they had walked right into it. Move, she shouted, her instincts kicking in as the team scrambled into action. Get to cover. But Rix wasn't retreating. He stood there, unbothered, as the room around them continued to shake and collapse. His eyes gleamed with anticipation, as if the chaos was precisely what he had been waiting for. There was no escape, not without confronting whatever he had set in motion. As the team scattered, Ilara sprinted toward Rix, fury boiling in her veins. You're going to pay for this, she hissed, her voice low and deadly. Oh, I don't think I am, Rix said smoothly, his tone mocking. I've already won. You just don't know it yet. Before Ilara could react, The floor beneath them cracked wide open, sending a surge of dust and debris into the air. From the depths of the rupture came a hum, a powerful, resonating sound that vibrated through the entire building. The ground seemed to tremble in response, and then something massive began to rise from below. It was a ship, a colossal, dark vessel. Its sleek design, almost alien in nature, began to emerge from the gaping hole in the floor. The ship's hull shimmered as it ascended, metal plates shifting with a sound like grinding gears, revealing a set of thrusters designed for rapid flight. "This is my real victory," Rick said with a smirk, gesturing toward the ship. "It's already been activated. The Excellenach will be here any minute." Ilara's pulse quickened as the realization hit her. Rick's wasn't just a trader. He had sold them out to the Excellenach long ago. This ship wasn't just for him to escape. It was a weapon, a tool to bring about the end of the rebellion. "You're the one who made the mistake," Ilara replied through gritted teeth, pulling him back with all her strength. Rick's twisted, trying to break free, but Ilara held firm. The ship above them was now fully engaged, its thrusters glowing bright orange, casting an eerie light over the room. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and the air was thick with static. Suddenly, the room shook again, and Ilara felt the ground tilt beneath her. The ship's engines were powering up. "You're running out of time," Rix hissed, trying to twist out of her grip. But Ilara wasn't letting go. She couldn't. "Ilara." Aiden's voice broke through her thoughts. "The grid's failing. If we don't stop this now, it's over." Aiden had no more time. She had to make her move. Summoning every ounce of strength, Ilara pulled Rix toward her, knocking him off balance. As he stumbled backward, she slammed him against the wall, pinning him with the full weight of her body. For a moment, they both just stared at each other. Two people on opposite sides of a war, caught in a battle of will and determination. "This is it, Rix," Ilara said, her voice fierce. "You don't get to walk away from this. You don't get to destroy everything we've built." Rix's eyes darkened, but his smirk remained. "You don't understand, do you? You're nothing but a pawn. The Excellenach will crush you. They'll burn everything to the ground." His words felt like a knife twisting in her gut, but Ilara couldn't afford to falter now. She reached for the small device at her belt, one of the many weapons they had acquired in their fight against the Excellenach. It was a disruptor, designed to cripple technology. She had no idea if it would work on the ship, but she had to try. Without hesitation, she activated the disruptor and aimed it at the ship's exposed power core. A sudden, violent pulse of energy shot from the device, striking the core with a blinding flash. The ship's engines sputtered and the hum faltered. For a moment, Ilara dared to hope. But then, with a deafening screech, the ship's engines roared to life again, stronger than before. No. Ilara's heart sank. The disruptor had only delayed the ship's activation, not stopped it. Rix had been right. Time was running out. "Do you see now?" Rix whispered, his voice triumphant. "You're too weak to stop me. You're too weak to stop them." Ilara's mind raced, but there was only one option left. She couldn't let Rix escape. The rebellion had no chance without him. They had to end this now. With one final push, Ilara grabbed Rix by the collar, hauling him back toward the center of the room. His feet kicked at the ground, but it was no use. She slammed him down onto the floor, her knees pressing into his chest. She needed him alive. But for the first time, she was willing to break that rule. "Tell me how to stop it," Ilara growled, her face inches from his. "Now, or I'll make you wish you hadn't betrayed us." The look in Rix's eyes shifted. There was fear there now, a flicker of realization that his plan might be unraveling. But it was too late. Rix's breathing quickened, his usual smugness cracking under the pressure. Ilara's weight on his chest was a reminder of just how close he was to losing everything. The ship above them hummed ominously, its power growing with each passing second. "You can't win, Ilara," Rix spat, his voice laced with venom. You don't even know what you're dealing with. The Excelinoc. Don't talk to me about the Excelinoc, Ilara growled, tightening her grip on his collar. You sold us out, Rix. You're the one who gave them this weapon. You're the one who put all of humanity at risk. His eyes flickered, a fleeting moment of hesitation passing over his features. But then, the defiance returned, stronger than before. I didn't do this for them. I did it for the future, he sneered, his tone bitter. Humanity will never stand on its own. The Excelinoc offer us power, real power, and you're too weak to see it. They're going to reshape everything. And you, he jerked, his voice rising in desperation. You're just another dying resistance. Ilara's grip tightened. You're wrong. It's not about power. It's about choice, the freedom to decide our own future. His eyes hardened, but Ilara saw a flicker of doubt, just for a moment. The ship's thrusters roared above them, and the air grew heavier with each second that passed. They were running out of time. She needed him to crack. She needed to break through the cold walls he'd built around himself. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The Excelinoc hadn't been just fighting them for control of Earth. They had been orchestrating their own downfall, allowing the rebellion to grow strong enough to be a real threat. And now, at the perfect moment, they were ready to crush it. I won't let you destroy everything we've fought for, Ilara growled, charging toward Rix. But before she could get within range, the ship's thrusters roared to life, and the air around her rippled with an intense, unnatural energy. The ship's engines flared with power, and Ilara felt an overwhelming pull, a force that yanked her off her feet and sent her crashing into the nearby wall. Aiden, she shouted, struggling to get back up. The room had turned into a war zone, with debris flying everywhere as the ship's engines began to power up. But there was no time for a safe retreat. The ship was nearly fully ascended. The tremors began again, even more violently this time. The walls cracked, and the structure of the building groaned under the strain. The team was scattering, trying to regroup, but the path to escape was rapidly narrowing. Rix was already moving, his footsteps echoing in the chaos, heading for an escape route at the back of the room. Ilara, we need to stop that ship, Aiden yelled, barely visible through the dust. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to her feet. The odds were stacked against them. The Excelinoc were moments away from arriving, and if Rix managed to escape, it would be the death knell for the rebellion. But as Ilara scanned the room, something caught her eye. The artifact. It had been the source of her power, the key to everything she had achieved so far, and now it seemed to hum with an unnatural resonance. The whispers in her mind grew louder, and for a split second, she considered using it. The thought of tapping into its raw energy sent a surge of adrenaline through her veins. But at what cost? Ilara, we don't have time. Aiden's voice snapped her back to reality. The decision had to be made now. With a final glance at the artifact, Ilara made her choice. She had to rely on herself and her team. We stop him. Now. The countdown had begun. They had one chance, and it was slipping away fast. The air was thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning metal as Ilara sprinted toward Rix, her heart hammering in her chest. The ship above them hummed with malevolent power, its thrusters roaring as it slowly lifted higher, threatening to tear the building apart in its wake. Ilara's mind raced, but there was no time to think. Her instincts took over. Rix was already halfway to the escape hatch, his steps deliberate, confident. The smile he wore never wavered, as if he was certain of his victory. But Ilara wasn't ready to give up, not when everything they had worked for was on the line. Aiden, Ilara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Take out the power grid. Disable that ship. Aiden's voice crackled over the comms. On it, Ilara. We've got maybe 2 minutes before the engines engage fully. That was all they had. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to stop the unthinkable from happening. Ilara charged forward, pushing her legs harder, ignoring the burning in her muscles. Rix was almost to the hatch now. She could see the anticipation in his eyes, the satisfaction of knowing he was about to escape. But there was no way in hell Ilara was going to let that happen. As she closed the distance between them, Rix's gaze flicked to her, his smirk never fading. "You're too late, Ilara. The Excellenok are already on their way. Once they have the artifact, your little rebellion will be nothing more than a memory." Ilara's blood boiled at his words, but she didn't stop. He could say whatever he wanted. None of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was stopping him. "You think you've won." Ilara's voice was low, filled with a determination that made even Rix pause. "You've underestimated me." She lunged forward, her arm outstretched, and with a swift movement, she grabbed the edge of his jacket. For a moment, he seemed surprised, his eyes flashing with anger. "Ilara, you're making a mistake," he warned, but the panic in his voice was unmistakable. "You really think the Excellenok care about your future, Rix?" Ilara pressed. "They've been playing us from the beginning. You're nothing but a tool to them. And once they have what they want, you'll be nothing more than a discarded asset." Rix flinched, and Ilara seized on the opening. "You think they'll let you live? They'll use you to their advantage, then they'll burn you just like they've burned the rest of us." For the first time, Rix seemed uncertain. His breath hitched, and his eyes darted to the ship above. But before he could respond, a voice cut through the silence. "Ilara, we're out of time." Aiden's voice crackled in her ear. "The ship's almost fully powered. We need to stop it now." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. There was no more time for conversation. No more chances for mercy. She had to make the final choice. In that instant, Ilara saw the true extent of Rix's betrayal. He hadn't just been a turncoat. He had been part of something much larger, a plan to sell out humanity itself. But there was still a sliver of hope left. She could still stop this. She stood up, pulling Rix to his feet with a fierce jerk. His body sagged under the pressure, but Ilara wasn't finished yet. The decision had to be made. She couldn't let him escape and risk the ship lifting off. She couldn't let him win. "Tell me how to stop the ship, Rix." "Now," Ilara demanded. Rix met her gaze, his lips curling into a defiant sneer. But there was no confidence left in his eyes. Only fear. "Even if I tell you," he said, his voice shaking, "it won't be enough. You're too late." "The Excellenok." Ilara cut him off with a sharp motion. "We don't have time for excuses. How do we stop it?" For a long moment, Rix hesitated. His body trembled, not from fear of Ilara, but from the knowledge that there was no turning back. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained. "There's a fail-safe inside the core. You'll need to disrupt the power grid from the inside. If you can reach the central core, you can overload it, but it's a one-shot deal. You won't be able to escape once you start the process." Ilara's mind raced. The core, that was their only chance. But the ship was lifting off faster now, its engines roaring with terrifying force. A low, menacing hum filled the room as the thrusters pushed the vessel upward. They were seconds away from losing it all. "Aiden," Ilara shouted. "Prepare the team. I'm going inside." She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed the disruptor and handed it to one of her team members. "You know what to do. Keep Rix covered." Without another word, Ilara bolted for the open hatch at the center of the room, where the ship's core pulsed with radiant energy. The walls closed in, the ship's rising momentum creating a suffocating pressure in the air. Ilara dove inside the hatch, the space cramped and dark, lit only by the erratic flashes of power surging through the system. The pulse of the core throbbed in her chest, like a heartbeat, loud and insistent. She reached the central console, fingers flying over the controls as she accessed the fail-safe system. A countdown appeared on the screen, accompanied by a red warning light. "Initiate power overload." "Confirm." There was no choice. Ilara hit the button. The countdown began. 5, 4. The countdown echoed in her ears. Outside the ship, the rumble of the engines intensified. 3, 2. Her heart raced. There was no turning back now. She would either stop this or die trying. 1. The ship's core erupted with a blinding flash of light, and everything went black.